My name is Madison Carter, and I was 30 years old when my mother canceled my birthday 3 days before the event. Not because someone was sick or because of a genuine emergency, but because my younger sister had created another crisis exactly when the attention was finally supposed to be on me. "We're canceling your birthday," Mom said the moment I answered. "Your sister needs us." Behind me, unopened wine bottles covered the kitchen counter. 40 engraved place cards waited beside the invitations. I had already paid the restaurant deposit, booked a photographer, and arranged transportation for relatives who had promised they would finally show up for me. "What happened this time?" I asked. "She had an argument with her boyfriend. She's devastated." My father texted before I could respond. "You're the strong one, you'll understand." That sentence had erased graduations, promotions, holidays, and every milestone I had earned. But this time, I had expected the sabotage. Days earlier, my sister had complained that my party was excessive. Then she suddenly announced that she was emotionally falling apart and needed the entire family beside her. I didn't cancel the restaurant. I transferred the reservation to a local charity, packed one suitcase, emptied the account my parents could access, and drove toward the lake house my grandfather had left behind. My family assumed I would calm down and return. They didn't know what I found among my grandfather's papers. They didn't know why my mother had spent years teaching me to accept second place. And when they followed my sister again, they never returned to the life they had built. 10 years later, one final letter forced them to face what choosing her had truly cost. Before I tell you what was hidden in that letter, and what happened after I disappeared, tell me, what time is it where you are? And where are you watching from? I want to know how far this story travels. The lake house stood 4 hours from the city, at the end of a private road my mother had always described as unsafe and impractical. Growing up, she discouraged me from visiting unless the entire family came. She said Grandpa Frank was stubborn, secretive, and obsessed with old grudges. Yet he had been the only person who never called me strong when he really meant convenient. Frank died 8 months before my canceled birthday. According to Mom, he left behind a deteriorating cabin, a few acres of useless land, and years of unpaid maintenance. She repeatedly suggested selling the property to a developer and dividing whatever remained between my parents and my sister, Jenna. Whenever I asked to review the estate papers, Mom claimed the attorney was still resolving complications. I believed her because believing her was easier than admitting my own mother might deliberately hide something from me. When I reached the lake house that night, the porch light was already on. A man in a dark jacket stepped outside as I parked. For one irrational second, I imagined Grandpa waiting for me. Then the stranger introduced himself as Harold Green, Frank's estate attorney. "Your grandfather told me you might come here after your 30th birthday," he said. I almost laughed. "He predicted my birthday would be canceled?" "He predicted your mother would create a reason you couldn't celebrate it." Harold unlocked the house and led me into Frank's study. His reading glasses still rested beside a half-finished crossword. A framed photograph of me at 17 stood on the desk, while the polished family portrait Mom displayed everywhere was nowhere in sight. Harold placed a folder before me. Inside was Frank's will, signed 2 years earlier. He had left the lake property, 32 surrounding acres, and a controlling interest in a land development company to me. Not to Mom, not to Jenna, to me. The assets were worth millions. A resort group had already offered to buy part of the shoreline, but Frank rejected the proposal because it would damage the lake. Instead, he wanted the property developed as an artist's retreat, something I had imagined during the summers I spent painting beside him. "There's another condition," Harold said. "You received full control on your 30th birthday. Until then, your mother held temporary administrative authority." My stomach tightened. What did she do with it? He opened another folder. For nearly 2 years, Mom had withdrawn money from the estate's operating account. She labeled the payments maintenance, legal fees, and emergency repairs. Most of the money actually paid Jenna's rent, debts, private retreats, failed business projects, and a luxury wedding venue she reserved despite not being engaged. More than $400,000 was missing. Harold had discovered the withdrawals months earlier and warned Frank. Before his death, Frank amended the trust so control would transfer directly to me at 30. He believed that if Mom knew I owned everything, she would manipulate me into signing it away. Beneath the records was a handwritten note. Maddie, they taught you that strength means surrendering what is yours. It doesn't. Strength means protecting what matters, even when the people demanding your sacrifice share your blood. Suddenly, the canceled birthday was no longer an isolated cruelty. Mom needed me distracted. She knew the trust transferred that week. Jenna's breakdown gave the family an excuse to keep me away from the lake, while Mom finalized documents classifying several withdrawals as authorized family distributions. Was Jenna involved? I asked. Harold hesitated. She received the money. Whether she understood where it came from is something we need to establish. My phone vibrated across the desk. Mom called twice. Dad called once. Jenna sent 7 messages, beginning with, "I'm sorry you're upset," and ending with, "Don't punish everyone because you're jealous." I turned the phone face down. What happens now? Harold looked toward the dark window. You decide whether this remains a family dispute or becomes a fraud investigation. All my life, Mom had solved Jenna's disasters by handing me the consequences. She gave away my college savings after Jenna was expelled. She pressured me to co-sign an apartment Jenna abandoned. She used my professional contacts to hide Jenna's misconduct at work. Each time I protested, Mom asked why I wanted my sister to suffer. Sitting in Frank's study, I finally understood the better question. Why had everyone believed I was supposed to suffer instead? I instructed Harold to freeze every trust account, notify the banks that Mom's authority had ended, and preserve the messages arriving from my family. I wasn't ready to involve the police, but I was finished protecting people who had never protected me. The next morning, I walked through the lake house with a notebook instead of nostalgia. I documented damaged windows, unpaid invoices, rooms filled with furniture Mom claimed had been sold, and boxes Frank had organized by year. This was no longer a peaceful escape. It was a crime scene disguised as an inheritance. One box contained my childhood artwork. Frank had saved everything: charcoal portraits, watercolor houses, sketches of imagined gardens, and a childish blueprint for an art center beside the lake. Underneath them was an envelope marked, "For Madison, after she learns the truth." Inside, Frank described an incident I barely remembered. When I was 12, he created education accounts for Jenna and me. Mine was larger because I was older and had qualified for an advanced summer art program. 2 years later, Jenna was expelled from private school after stealing an exam and blaming another student. Mom paid the school to keep the matter quiet. The money came from my account. I had been told the summer program lost my application. When I was 16, Frank invested in a design portfolio I had begun selling online. Mom closed the account after Jenna complained that my success made her feel inadequate. I was told the website violated tax rules. When I was 22, a gallery invited me to join a group exhibition. Jenna had just ended an engagement and threatened to hurt herself if the family attended my opening instead of staying with her. Mom pressured me to withdraw, promising another opportunity would come. It never did. Frank's letter contained dates, bank statements, and messages my mother had sent him. In one, she wrote, "Madison can recover from disappointment. Jenna cannot. We have to invest our resources where they are most needed." Resources. Not affection, not time. Resources. My mother had turned favoritism into a financial policy. Because I functioned without collapsing, she interpreted my stability as permission to take more. Jenna learned the opposite lesson. Every breakdown produced attention, money, and protection. Harold arrived with Priya Shah, an accountant who had worked with Frank's company. Together, we traced the withdrawals. Jenna's crises followed a consistent pattern. Whenever a document required my signature, an investment matured, or Frank scheduled an estate meeting, Jenna suddenly faced an emergency: a car accident with no police report, medical treatment without an invoice, an eviction threat from a property my parents secretly owned, or a business failure involving a business that never existed. An email recovered from Frank's records revealed the truth. 3 days before my birthday, Jenna wrote to Mom, "Are you sure this will work? She already paid for everything." Mom replied, "She'll be angry, but she always comes back. Once she signs the revised authorization, we can reimburse the account later." Jenna answered, And if she asks about Grandpa's company? Mom responded, she doesn't know she owns it. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Jenna knew. Her crisis was not just another selfish demand for attention. It was a planned distraction. My family intended to cancel my birthday, pressure me into comforting her, and place financial documents before me while I was exhausted. Those documents would have transferred voting authority over Frank's company to Mom for 5 more years. A development consortium had increased its offer for the shoreline. If Mom gained control, she could sell the land, replace the money she stole, give Jenna a fortune, and still appear financially successful. Frank's protected lake would become luxury condominiums, and the artist's retreat would disappear. My first impulse was to expose them immediately, but revenge delivered too early becomes a warning. I wanted them to continue behaving exactly as they always had, certain I would return, apologize, and sign whatever they gave me. So I answered Mom's next call. Maddie, thank God, we've been terrified. I needed time, I said, making myself sound tired instead of angry. You scared your sister. She thinks you hate her. I don't hate her. Mom exhaled. Come home this weekend, we'll have dinner. Your father wants to discuss paperwork related to Grandpa's property, but it's nothing complicated. There it was. Not an apology, not concern about where I was. The paperwork. I'll think about it. Maddie, we're your family. For 30 years those words had been a lock. This time they sounded like a confession. Harold advised me not to accuse them until the accounts were secured. Priya reconstructed every withdrawal. I stayed at the lake, but I did not spend my days watching sunsets and healing. I met contractors, reviewed company records, contacted Frank's partners, and learned how to exercise the authority my family tried to steal. Within 2 weeks, I replaced the compromised financial manager. Within 3, I rejected the condominium proposal and opened negotiations with an environmental foundation. I also contacted an art school director who had known Frank. Together, we designed seasonal workshops, paid residencies, and public exhibitions. For the first time, my creativity was not a hobby I had to defend. It was part of my future. Jenna called repeatedly. At first, she sounded apologetic, then impatient. Finally, furious. You're punishing Mom over a birthday party. This isn't about the party. Then what is it about? She needed me to reveal what evidence I possessed. You tell me, I said. The silence lasted 4 seconds too long. Then she began crying. Usually, that sound activated something automatic inside me. This time, I remembered her email. She already paid for everything. You don't care what happens to me, she whispered. No, I replied. I've simply stopped believing something must happen to me instead. I ended the call and blocked her number. The next stage of my life did not begin when I reached the lake. It began when her tears stopped controlling me. 6 weeks after my canceled birthday, I returned to my parents' house wearing a plain navy suit and carrying a leather folder. Harold waited in a car nearby. Priya had already delivered copies of the financial evidence to an investigator, but no formal complaint had been filed. I wanted one final answer before deciding how far to go. Did Dad know? He opened the door and hugged me. There's my strong girl. The phrase nearly made me leave. Inside, Mom had recreated a birthday dinner. A grocery store cake sat beneath 31 candles because, she explained, we could celebrate next year early. Jenna waited at the table without makeup, wearing an oversized sweater carefully chosen to make her look fragile. For a moment the scene was convincing. Mom touched my shoulder. Dad poured wine. Jenna apologized for needing support at the wrong time. Then Mom placed a document beside my plate. We should handle this before dessert. It simply allows me to manage Grandpa's property until the estate is settled. I opened it as though I had never seen it. Dad avoided my eyes. Did you read this? I asked him. Your mother understands financial matters better than I do. That wasn't my question. Jenna shifted in her chair. Why are you making this hostile? I looked at her. When did you learn Grandpa left the company to me? Her expression changed instantly. Mom answered for her. No one knows exactly what your grandfather intended. He was confused toward the end. He passed 3 cognitive evaluations during the year he amended the trust. The room went still. I removed copies of the will, trust amendment, and withdrawal records from my folder and arranged them across the table. Mom's color drained. Dad picked up the first page. By the third, his hands were trembling. $416,000, I said. That is the amount transferred from the estate into accounts connected to Jenna. Some of it passed through your joint account, Dad. He looked at Mom. Susan? Her shock quickly became anger. That money belongs to this family. Your grandfather created unnecessary divisions. I was protecting everyone. You were preparing to sell protected land. To secure our future. Whose future? Jenna struck the table. Stop acting like you earned any of this. Grandpa gave you everything because you manipulated him. By visiting him? You made him feel sorry for you. I was the only person who called when he became ill. Because you always wanted to look perfect. There it was. The resentment beneath every emergency. Jenna did not merely want support. She wanted proof that whatever I built could be taken from me. Mom stepped between us. Madison, your sister has struggled in ways you cannot understand. I understand more than you think. I placed copies of the emails on the table. Jenna saw the first message and stopped speaking. Dad read Mom's reply aloud. She doesn't know she owns it. He lowered the page. You planned the call? Mom stared at him as though his question were a betrayal. I was preventing Madison from making an impulsive decision. You canceled her birthday to obtain her signature. She would have signed eventually. Dad looked at me then, perhaps for the first time in years. I didn't know about the trust. But you knew she used my college fund. You knew she took my savings to protect Jenna. You knew I was pressured to co-sign her apartment. You knew every milestone of mine disappeared whenever Jenna objected. I thought your mother would replace the money. Did you ever check? He could not answer. Mom began gathering the papers. This has gone far enough. Madison, you're emotional. We'll talk after you calm down. I put my hand over the documents. No. Tonight you listen. I told them the accounts were frozen, Mom's authority had ended, the land sale was cancelled, and the evidence had been preserved. Then I offered two paths. They could return every recoverable dollar, surrender all claims against Frank's estate, provide complete financial records and sign a written admission. Or I would authorize a formal fraud complaint. Mom laughed. You would send your own mother to prison? No, your decisions might. Jenna stood so quickly that her chair fell backward. You're destroying us over money you don't even need. That sentence ended my remaining doubt. She was not sorry. She was afraid because the money had stopped. What did you spend it on? Dad asked. The truth emerged in pieces. Jenna had used the funds to maintain an expensive apartment, lease a luxury vehicle, pay debts, finance a fake wellness company, and reserve a destination wedding venue. Her boyfriend had ended their relationship days before my birthday, after discovering she lied about owning Frank's company. Her crisis was real only because the future she stole was collapsing. Dad walked out without speaking. Mom followed him. Jenna remained beside the overturned chair. You always win, she whispered. I looked at the cheap cake Mom bought to prove harm could be repaired with frosting. No, I said. You were simply protected from losing. I left the unsigned transfer document beside her plate. That night, Dad called Harold and agreed to provide access to every joint account. Mom refused. 3 days later, she attempted to transfer the family home into Jenna's name. That decision turned private betrayal into legal war. The attempted transfer triggered an immediate response from the bank. Because the family home had been used as collateral for loans connected to Jenna's supposed company, moving ownership during an investigation raised fraud concerns. The bank froze additional accounts, and creditors began asking questions Mom could no longer silence. Within a month, the image she had spent decades building began to fracture. Mom was not famous, but reputation governed her world. She chaired charity committees, hosted fundraisers, and advised friends about financial responsibility. Her generosity, I discovered, had often been financed with money that did not belong to her. Harold found estate payments to 3 charities where Mom publicly claimed credit as the donor. He also found transfers used to cover events she organized. When the first charity contacted her, she blamed an accounting error. When the second asked her to resign temporarily, she accused me of running a smear campaign. I had contacted neither organization. The records spoke for themselves. Dad moved into a furnished apartment and gave investigators passwords, tax returns, and old correspondence. His cooperation did not excuse his passivity, but it revealed that Mom had hidden more from him than I realized. For years, he handed her financial control because confrontation was uncomfortable. He called it trust. I called it chosen ignorance. One evening, he came to the lake alone. "I should have stopped it," he said. "Yes. I kept telling myself Jenna needed more help. You knew helping her always meant taking from me." He lowered his head. "You never fell apart. That doesn't mean I wasn't harmed. I understand that now." "No. You understand the consequences now." He flinched, but I did not soften the sentence. Regret after exposure is not the same as conscience before it. Dad handed me an old phone he found in a locked drawer. It contained years of messages between Mom and Jenna. The birthday scheme was only one part of their plan. They had also discussed persuading me to move home by claiming Dad was ill, then appointing Mom as my financial representative. Jenna suggested introducing me to one of her boyfriend's business partners, hoping a relationship would make me invest estate money in their projects. In another message, Mom described me as emotionally predictable. She'll resist, then feel guilty. Give her time. I read the messages without crying. My anger had become colder, less like fire, and more like architecture. It showed me exactly where walls were needed. The next day, I authorized Harold to file a civil action seeking restitution, removal of Mom from every estate roll, and damages connected to the attempted land transfer. I also approved referral of the evidence to authorities. I did not post accusations online or contact relatives. Formal documents are quieter than revenge speeches, but they travel farther. Mom was served at a charity luncheon. Jenna received her papers at the office she rented for her wellness brand. By the end of the week, her landlord terminated the lease for non-payment. Her vehicle was repossessed, and the wedding venue kept most of her deposit because she had made the reservation using false financial declarations. She called me from an unfamiliar number. "I have nowhere to go. You can stay with Mom. She might lose the house. She attempted to give it to you because she loves me, because she needed to hide it. You're enjoying this." I considered the accusation. Part of me felt satisfaction, but not because she was frightened. I felt satisfied because her decisions finally belonged to her. "I'm not rescuing you," I said. "I'm your sister. You knew Mom was taking money from the estate. I didn't know it was stealing. She said the money would be mine eventually. And you believed you deserved it? Grandpa barely knew me. You barely knew him." She began crying. "What am I supposed to do?" It was the question she had avoided all her life. Get a job. Sell what you own. Speak honestly with investigators. Stop turning every consequence into someone else's emergency. "You sound heartless." "No. I sound unavailable." I blocked the number. Months passed. The civil case exposed unauthorized borrowing and falsified expense reports. Mom eventually agreed to surrender the family home, liquidate investments, and return assets purchased with estate funds. The recovered amount did not cover everything, but it protected the lake from creditors. The criminal inquiry continued separately. Dad filed for divorce. Jenna rented a room and took an administrative job. She told relatives I had destroyed the family because Grandpa loved me more. Some believed her. Others apologized for ignoring the favoritism they witnessed. I no longer campaigned for anyone's approval. What mattered was that the pattern had stopped. At the lake, construction began on Frank's artist's retreat. We restored the house, converted an old workshop into studios, and created a scholarship for adults who abandoned creative work because their families considered it impractical. I named the first residency program Strong One, not because strength requires endless sacrifice, but because real strength sometimes begins with refusing the role everyone assigned you. 10 years after my canceled birthday, the lake property no longer resembled the neglected place Mom intended to sell. The original house remained at its center, surrounded by 6 cabins, 2 shared studios, a community kitchen, and an exhibition hall overlooking the protected shoreline. Artists came from across the country. Local students attended free workshops. Environmental groups used part of the land for research. Frank's company became profitable without destroying the lake. I became its director, but I also returned to painting. My work focused on family photographs altered by memory, missing figures, hidden faces, empty chairs where someone should have been celebrated. My first major exhibition was titled "The Strong One Is Not Invisible." On opening night, hundreds filled the gallery. My family had once canceled a room of 40 people because Jenna's boyfriend left her. 10 years later, strangers crossed states to see work I nearly abandoned because my family taught me that her pain mattered more than my purpose. Mom did not attend. After the legal proceedings, she avoided prison through a plea agreement requiring restitution, probation, financial monitoring, and community service. She lost the house, her board positions, and most of her social circle. She moved to a modest apartment and worked part-time in an insurance office. For years, she wrote letters blaming Frank, Dad, and me. She claimed I exaggerated ordinary family sacrifices and turned private misunderstandings into legal accusations. She insisted that a loving daughter would have handled everything quietly. I never responded. Dad visited the lake twice a year. Our relationship remained polite but limited. He apologized, attended counseling, and accepted that forgiveness did not restore access. I no longer hated him, but I no longer trusted apologies to rewrite history. Jenna changed more slowly. After losing Mom's support, she moved through several jobs and relationships. For years, she claimed I stole her inheritance. Then, an investigator showed her Frank's original records, including the educational accounts Mom redirected. Jenna learned that she had not been denied an inheritance. She had consumed mine. The discovery did not transform her overnight. She entered therapy, left social media, repaid a small portion of the money, and stopped contacting me through alternate numbers. 5 years passed before I received a letter containing no accusation. "I knew what Mom was doing," she wrote. "Maybe I didn't understand every legal detail, but I knew she was taking something meant for you. I let myself believe you could survive it because that made accepting what I received easier. I was jealous, and I used being fragile as power. I'm sorry." I kept the letter but did not answer. An apology can be sincere without creating an obligation to reunite. On the 10th anniversary of the canceled birthday, Harold called. He had retired but remained trustee for one final sealed instruction Frank left behind. "The release date is today," he said. "There's a letter addressed to all 4 of you. Frank required us to meet at the lake if we wanted to hear it." Participation was voluntary. I almost declined until Harold added, "Your grandfather recorded a video." Dad arrived first. He looked older and smaller than the man who once texted that I was strong enough to lose another birthday. Jenna arrived alone, dressed simply, her expression guarded. Mom came last. Her hair had turned silver. No one hugged. Harold placed a laptop on Frank's desk and started the recording. Grandpa appeared wearing the faded plaid shirt he used during summers at the lake. "If you're watching this," he began, "Madison has reached 40, and enough time has passed for consequences to reveal character." He described how Mom redirected resources toward Jenna, how Dad surrendered responsibility to preserve peace, how Jenna used instability as influence, and how I was rewarded for competence with abandonment. Then he revealed the final secret. The trust originally contained a separate fund worth nearly $1 million. Frank intended to divide it among Jenna and my parents if they respected the property transfer and allowed me to control the company without manipulation. If anyone concealed the inheritance, misused estate funds, or pressured me to surrender authority, the family fund would be revoked and donated to the artist's retreat. Mom stared at the screen. She had not stolen $400,000 to secure Jenna's future. Her actions caused all 3 of them to lose nearly $1 million more, Frank continued. "Susan, you may believe you protected your younger daughter. You did not. You taught her that love removes consequences, then called Madison cruel when she refused to keep paying them." Mom's lips parted but no sound came. "To my son-in-law, silence is still a decision. You cannot surrender authority and later claim innocence because someone else used it badly. To Jenna, pain deserves compassion, but pain is not ownership. Your sister's joy was never evidence of your neglect. And to Madison, their regret does not purchase your return. You owe them honesty, not access. Build the place we imagined and celebrate every birthday they taught you to surrender. The screen went dark. Mom finally whispered, "He set me up." Jenna answered before I could. "No. He gave us a choice." Mom turned toward her. "Everything I did was for you. You did it because you needed me dependent on you." The words struck harder coming from Jenna. "After everything I sacrificed," Mom began. "You sacrificed Madison," Jenna said. "That was the problem." Dad walked out. Mom looked at me, waiting for judgment or reassurance. I lost everything. I thought about the opportunities she erased, the money she took, and the birthday she canceled because she believed my disappointment carried no cost. "No," I said. "You lost what you believed you could take without consequences." She asked whether I would ever forgive her. I stopped organizing my life around that question years ago. Then I left the study and walked toward the exhibition hall, where the staff was preparing my 40th birthday celebration. This time, no one canceled it. Nearly 200 people gathered beside the lake that night. Residents displayed unfinished paintings, children pinned drawings to temporary walls, musicians performed near the restored garden, and former scholarship recipients returned with stories about careers they once feared pursuing. At the center of the hall stood a long table decorated with wild flowers. For most of my life, birthdays felt like negotiations. I learned not to ask for too much, invite too many people, or appear too excited. Happiness made Jenna feel excluded, and her discomfort became my responsibility. At 40, I understood that joy does not require permission from those who benefit from your disappointment. Dad stayed for the celebration but kept his distance. Before leaving, he handed me a small box containing the place card from my canceled 30th birthday. He had taken it from the restaurant after learning I donated the reservation. "I kept thinking there would be a way to repair that night," he said. "There wasn't." He nodded. "I know." For once, he did not ask me to comfort him. Jenna remained near the back of the hall. When the crowd thinned, she approached and gave me an envelope containing a cashier's check for another portion of what she owed. "It isn't much," she said. "It's more than last year." "I was promoted." "Congratulations." The word surprised both of us. She looked toward the water. "I used to think you had everything because you didn't need anyone." "I needed people. I learned they wouldn't come." "I know." We stood in silence. "Do you think we'll ever be sisters again?" she asked. "We are sisters. That doesn't automatically make us close." She accepted the answer without crying, arguing, or turning it into evidence that I was cruel. That was the first sign that she might truly be changing. I did not invite her back into my life. Reconciliation is not a prize people receive for finally recognizing the damage they caused. Trust returns through years of consistent choices, and sometimes it never returns. But I no longer hated her. Hatred would have required continuing to center her. Mom left before the celebration began. She sent one final message through Harold, claiming Frank had poisoned the family against her. I deleted it. Some people interpret boundaries as punishment because they were comfortable when you had none. Others insist exposing betrayal is more destructive than committing it. But silence protected Mom, not our family. Sacrifice enabled Jenna, not healed her. Dad's passivity preserved temporary peace while allowing permanent harm. The truth destroyed only the arrangement that depended on everyone pretending not to see it. When it was time to cut the cake, the room began singing. I looked around at the artists, students, friends, employees, and neighbors who built this place with me. No one waited for an emergency to interrupt the song. No one watched the door for a sister who might demand the room. No one expected me to surrender my moment to prove I was strong. I closed my eyes and made a wish. Not for revenge, because revenge had already arrived through consequences. Mom lost the reputation she valued more than honesty. Jenna lost the protection that kept her dependent. Dad lost the family peace he purchased with silence. All three lost the future Frank prepared because they tried to take mine. My wish was that every person raised as the strong one would learn what Frank taught me. Strength is not your family's permission to neglect you. Love does not require you to finance someone else's irresponsibility, conceal their betrayal, or accept an empty chair at your own celebration. Sometimes leaving is not abandonment. Sometimes it is the first honest answer you have ever given. After the guests left, I walked alone to the edge of the lake. Lights from the retreat stretched across the water toward the shoreline Mom almost sold. 10 years earlier, I arrived with one suitcase, believing I had lost my family over a canceled birthday. In reality, the cancellation exposed a family structure that depended on my obedience. I had not lost them that night. I had stopped losing myself. The next morning, I framed Frank's final note and placed it inside the entrance hall where every new resident could see it. Strength does not mean surrendering what is yours. Beneath it, I added one sentence of my own. And being family does not exempt anyone from the consequences of taking it.
We truly appreciate your time today. All events and situations are fictional and created only for dramatic storytelling and educational entertainment. We hope it reminds you that peace after betrayal doesn't happen all at once. But every time you choose not to return to what broke you, you take one more step toward the life you deserved all along.